We've been keeping a secret.
Very big secret. And we're still going to be kind of keeping it unless you're in the Discord or on Patreon, in which case you already know the cool news. So
Yeah, so on Saturday, a couple days after this episode releases, we have a very big and exciting interview that we've done, and we cannot wait to share it with you. If you're on Patreon, like Charlotte said, you know about it. If you're not on Patreon, get on there because the free tier does get the early episode reveals. So this is one you're going to want to know about it. So yeah, I think we should just stop talking about it because I'm going to want to say something.
I know I already want to be like, well, and here and this and this and
Yeah.
this, but like we can't. So let's just let's get on with extra credit. You guys have had a tidbit. You know where to find out what
Yeah,
we're talking about if you want
exactly.
to. We'll
With
leave it at
that,
that. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dina.
And I'm Charlotte.
Welcome to the Grim Curriculum Extra Credit.
Welcome, welcome. We have a few stories for you today.
Mhm.
Got some updates. We got a listener email.
We got 2 listener emails.
Yes, we do.
We got all sorts of fun stuff. First and foremost, Paul Bernado update.
Oh, boo, boo. But you know what? I'm thankful that we know what he's doing because I feel like he's a man you don't want to let drop off the map.
Yeah, and you know what? In the Canadian justice system, it's not like it's on court TV where like if you're in California, we get to see everything, or
Yes.
Florida or something like that. So the average person gets to see of Paul Bernado is courtroom sketches.
Yeah.
They're not flattering.
Good.
Right? I know. I'm just like, good.
We're here for the realism, not
Yep.
for the fantasy.
Exactly. So we recently covered Paul Bernado and Karla Homolka. We know that Karla Homolka is out there living her best life. Paul is still in prison, and it looks like he is staying there until further notice because he has been denied parole, and it's not looking good.
Yes. Yes. Because there was, I'm not going to lie, a teeny part of me that's like, what if? What if he gets out?
Yeah, and his security level has been decreased.
Mhm.
So that a lot of people were thinking, well, if we're starting to give him these little bits and pieces of a little bit more freedom, does that mean that he is going to get out? But he ain't.
Thank God for that.
The Parole Board of Canada reached its decision last Tuesday after a long and emotional hearing. The families of Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffey pleaded with the parole board to keep him locked away. And after deliberating for about 30 minutes, the 2-member panel told Paul Bernado, who is now 60 years old, that he is being denied day parole, full parole, and temporary absences from the facility.
Only 2 people on the panel. Wow. For
Yeah.
some reason in my head, and maybe this is just Hollywood movie magic, but I imagined like 8 people being the final decision makers.
It was 2 people, and it says 30 minutes, and there's a big part of me that's like, they probably were like, no. And then they sat there and they're like, let's just like sit here a bit longer. So it's
right. Like,
legitimate, 'cause-
let's finish our coffees and then we'll go back and tell him no because there's no fucking way.
The panel member, Tanya Nguyen, said, although you have made progress, we are still placing a lot of weight on the clinical assessments, a lot of weight on the seriousness of your criminal behavior, and for that reason, the board has determined today your risk would be undue. Paul Bernado then thanked the panel for reviewing his file, and then this is how it was written in the article, so I have to share it. He shuffled out of the hearing room.
Yeah. To me, as the people on the parole panel, I think you have an incredible amount of responsibility on your shoulders.
Yeah.
Because if you are responsible for the freedom of someone like this, like, yes, parole is not 100% freedom, but you're not incarcerated anymore, and you're wandering about the earth, if you will. If it then turned out that he broke his parole, and I would imagine Paul Bernado fucking would, in one way, shape, or form, then that's on you as the person that chose to let him out.
Yeah, and so like we mentioned, the victims' families were there. Deborah Mahaffey, Leslie's mother, read a victim statement that said, I remain hopeful that you understand the sadistic, manipulative, and psychopathic nature of Bernardo's behavior and the endless threat that he represents to public safety. He chose to harm and kill others, and his behaviors and actions have dictated that he experienced the loss of freedom to protect society from him.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself.
And her brother also delivered a victim impact statement. He was 11 years old when his sister was murdered. He is now 40. He shared some pretty heartbreaking stuff. He said, "My partner and I agonized over what to name our kids. We wanted to honor her by name and couldn't for fear of what they will find when they or others Googled their names. Bernardo's actions haunt the simplest details of my life. Even tasks around my home, like using a power saw or mixing concrete, cannot be done without intrusive thoughts of what he did to my sister."
It's not just the person who is murdered that becomes the victim. Obviously, they are,
Mm-hmm.
but their families and friends and everyone else are also victimized by this. And I understand the weight and how hard it must be for them, the family members, have to stand up again and
Yep.
again every time he comes up for parole and have to put their hearts out there and be like, this
Mm-hmm.
is why he does not deserve to be free. But I am so glad that they have the courage to keep doing it because I don't think he should be free.
No, absolutely not. The fact that Carla Homolka is free is an injustice, and that's an
Absolutely.
understatement.
Absolutely.
And the fact that they just have to do this, and again, it's the way the law is. He has that right as a human being, but it is victimizing them over and over again. Ryan Mahaffey, he now has children, so this is becoming generational now too, which
Mm-hmm.
is even more sad. Donna French reminded the parole board that it has been 11,680 days that she's had to live without her daughter. She says, "Each day I'm not able to hug her, kiss her, tell her how proud I am of her and how very much I love her. For a mother, that is an agony for which there are no words. I've longed for the girlish giggles of Kristen and her friends at her birthday parties, the sleepovers, the skating competitions, the pool parties, school concerts, and family vacations." And she also said, "As long as there's any possibility of that happening, the release, there will be no peace of mind for me or my family."
Absolutely.
So he asked Paul Bernardo, he wanted to be released to a halfway house in Quebec or to be granted escorted absences from prison to attend additional programs for sex offenders in the community. His correctional officer that spoke said that he's adjusted well since moving to medium security, but that he overestimates his progress while underestimating the risk that he presents.
Well, okay, let's talk about that for a sec because even if he was released into something like a halfway house,
Mm-hmm.
not only do we have to consider the risk that he himself presents to the people around him, because like you say, he may have made some progress with his quote unquote rehabilitation,
Mm-hmm.
but knowing what we know about Paul Bernardo, I think he's vastly overestimating how much of a quote unquote good human being he's becoming.
Absolutely.
But not only that, there are a lot of people in this country and around the world that would take the opportunity to scrub him out. And a
Yep.
halfway house, I do not think this man should have a moment of peace or safety in his life. I think someone would
Yeah.
find out who he was and take things upon themselves.
Well, look at old Willie Picton, right? He was
Mhm.
recently murdered while incarcerated because even when you're inside, these people are at risk because someone who's inside, who's serving a life sentence, wants to be the guy that took out Paul Bernardo. You know what I mean? Like, that's a lot of cred, if you will.
Yeah, and I mean, Paul Bernardo, he doesn't even eat the same food that the rest of the inmates eat in prison because
Mm-hmm.
he is so terrified that someone is going to try and either just fuck with his food, either like piss in it or spit in it or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
or that someone's going to straight up poison him. So he actually gets his food brought in from kind of wherever he wants,
Yeah,
whether
it's
it's
ridiculous.
McDonald's or Boston Pizza or whatever.
Now, when they had this hearing, he spent more than 2 hours answering questions from the parole board members.
Okay.
And he's painting a very different story of himself. He says that he was abandoned and neglected by his parents, which caused him to take what he called a victim stance. He's claiming that his mother was sexually abused and that he wanted to, and I quote, "pay the world back." He said, "I have no excuse for what I did. I wanted revenge." One of the members of the parole board asked how sexually assaulting and murdering other women amounts to paying the world back for his mother's assault. She said, "You are then victimizing other women." Paul Bernardo then said his attitude was, and I quote, "F the world, I'll do it back."
I don't believe that for a second.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about this. It takes a certain kind of person for us to say this, but he is one of the people we said this about, where when you do certain things of this nature and this level of brutality, your human card gets revoked. You don't get to be around the public. You don't get to go and have a normal life. You are done. And if we can't take you out back and shoot you, we might as well keep you locked up. And with Paul Bernardo, I know that sounds very extreme. If you disagree, go listen to the series again, because this is a truly evil human being.
100%.
This is now the third time that he has sought parole. They denied his request in 2018 and 2021. This hearing attracted some controversy when the family's lawyer told the media last week that the Parole Board of Canada originally planned to bar the families from being in the same room as Bernardo, citing security reasons.
I can understand from their point of view.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, if the families wish to give these victim impact statements and to continue to do so at these parole hearings, if I were that family member speaking, I would want to look him right in the face as I was speaking.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. That's what the lawyer said. He said that the laws should be changed so that the victims don't have to go through the parole board process every few years. But until that happens, the families have the right to confront their daughter's killer in person.
Absolutely. That's actually a really good point.
The other thing that they said is that when he's being transferred, so he was transferred from maximum security to minimum security, the family should be made aware of that, which they weren't.
100% they should have. Absolutely.
So as it stands, Paul Bernardo is not getting out anytime soon. I'm sure there will be another hearing in a few years, but he's someone that there's always that chance that he could get out. But I would be absolutely shocked if he did, because he is just so high profile that the backlash that would occur is something that I don't think they ever want to deal with.
I think it would be a circus of gargantuan force if he ever actually gets out.
Yeah.
And like you say, one day maybe, but he's 60 years old now. And, you know, prison can be hard on a person. We'll see, I guess.
Yeah.
I hope that he never does see a day of freedom.
Me too.
I don't want that. I don't think anybody else involved in this case wants that. I think as a person on the parole panel, that would be a very, very difficult thing to remain unbiased and, you know, simply take what you're seeing in front of you, knowing the history.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't be able to, but that's why I'm here talking about it and I'm not on the parole board.
I think with him, because of the way that Karla Homolka got out, they will never let him out, because that means that now both of them are out. And I just don't see that happening.
Exactly. They made their quote unquote deal with the devil when they dealt with her. They're not going to make the same deal twice.
No.
Alrighty. Well, we'll leave it at that for Paul Bernardo. Hopefully we won't be talking about another parole hearing in another couple of years, but I wouldn't hold my breath for it either. I do have a real quick Icelandic volcano update for us. Nothing too crazy. On November 20th, 2024, so not that long ago, lava from a new eruption burst open in a volcanic fissure very, very close to where all the others have happened. This is now the 7th since December of 2023.
Dang.
It erupted, flowed across some major roads, and it was closing in on the beautiful Blue Lagoon that's very famous, but it didn't quite make it there. So basically now they say that whenever a new eruption or anything happens in the area, they automatically, on very short notice, completely close and evacuate the Blue Lagoon. So, because tourists are still allowed to go while it's safe, but once the earthquakes start and the rumblings start, they close it down just in case, but it is still good. According to the Icelandic Meteorological Office, about 5 hours after the eruption began, the VIRES, which is the Visible Infrared Imaging Radiometer Suite from the Suomi NPP satellite, captured the nighttime image. I'm going to show Dina, but basically they knew it was erupting because it was brighter than the capital city.
Wow, holy crap.
So from space, the eruption itself was bigger than the city lights of Reykjavik.
Wow.
The lava flowed east and west from the fissure. So when we've talked about these eruptions in the past, they've affected the little town of Grindavik, which we talked about had to be completely evacuated. You know, people were not allowed back in their homes. Luckily, this time it flowed in the opposite direction. The only damage that was really done this time by this particular eruption was it flowed into the car park of the Blue Lagoon. and it enveloped a small service building,
Oh.
but that was really it. The earthquake activity has slowed down significantly in the last week or so since the eruption happened. The good thing is really tourism and everything hasn't been affected. Flights are not affected because apparently these are what is called a fissure eruption. So if you haven't seen any of the pictures or anything of the Icelandic eruptions over the last year so far, if you're picturing in your head the classic volcano, i.e., like the mountain with, the lava coming out of the top, that's not the case here. This is basically a case of the land splitting open and just the lava pouring out. It's not coming out of like a mountain per se. And so, because of this, you don't get the same big like smoke clouds and everything.
Oh, okay.
So, because of that, air travel and stuff is really not affected. We're not too worried about any like gases or anything escaping at the time. They say it's not a threat to travelers, but don't go near the site. Like let's not be stupid. That's again the 7th in a year. But it just seems like everyone's kind of taking it in stride. They're like, yeah, we live in Iceland. This is what happens, man.
They're probably used to it by now. They're like, oh yeah, just another one.
Just to end here, the eruptions that they've had in the past year, including, so we've had the 7th over sort of the last year since December 2023, but they had one on the 3rd of August 22, 10th of July 2023, 18th of December 2023, which is when our year kind of started.
Yeah.
Then we had the 14th of January 2024, the 8th of February 2024, 16th of March 24, 29th of May 24, the 22nd of August, which I talked about last time, and now we're the 20th of November. So we'll see if any more happens. I think I kind of mentioned or alluded to it before. The scientists that are studying all this volcanic and geothermal activity think that this is something that could just be going on now for some time, that it's just going to be kind of part of the new almost weather system, right? It's like you wake up in the morning, you check the volcano alert to see what's going on.
Yeah.
You get on with your life. But yeah. So hopefully that's our last volcano update of 2024. But I'll keep you guys in the loop as always.
Awesome. I love a good volcano update.
Yeah.
Alrighty, now back to true crime. Our American friends just celebrated Thanksgiving, so this story just happened the other day.
Okay. Well, you know what? From what I've been seeing on the TikTokies and whatnot, apparently a lot of family shenanigans happens on Thanksgiving. So I can only imagine that this is going to be nuts.
All right. So Robert Lombardi, 65 years old, has been charged in connection to the death of his roommate, Frank Griswold, who was 80, after he fatally shoved him at their home on November 27th. This was in Massachusetts, and he's being charged with involuntary manslaughter after a disagreement about preparations for Thanksgiving dinner.
Oh, no.
And wait till you hear why. 2 old guys. Yeah. In a press release, they said that the Marshfield police received a 911 call for a report of an unconscious male who was on the floor of a kitchen located at 853 Main Street. Griswold was found bleeding from the head by authorities and suffered a laceration to his forehead and a fractured neck. He was transported to the South Shore Hospital, where he died later of his injuries.
Oh, man.
A preliminary investigation determined that the suspect shoved the victim following a disagreement over holiday meal preparations, and then he fell to the floor. So they got into the disagreement, and this is from Lombardi.
Okay.
He said that he was cooking a meal, and he got into an argument with Frank because he didn't want him in the kitchen touching the food.
I think a lot of people can relate to that. A lot of our mothers, for sure, have been like, get out of my kitchen.
He said that his roommate often sneezes, and he didn't want him to sneeze or contaminate the food that he was making for Thanksgiving. He said that he left the kitchen, and later he returned to find him again near the food, so he grabbed him from behind, and he surmised that Frank Griswold's feet got tangled up and he fell and hit his head on the floor.
I mean, especially as we start to get older, our skin gets a lot thinner.
Yep.
And as many of you will know, a head wound, first of all, when you're that age, any normal knock can immediately just turn into a massive wound. Because you're, like I said, your skin's thin. Secondly, if a head wound is going to be a bleeder, we got a lot of blood vessels in our big old skulls. And for older folks, you can't bounce back from something like that as easy.
The sad thing is that Mr. Griswold, apparently he understood, okay, you don't want me near the food. No problem. I'll go do the dishes.
Oh.
And that's what he was doing. So the two had known each other for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
They had met in the 1990s while working together, and they started living together in 2001. This is the second home that they rented together. So they've been roommates for a very long time. The exact manner and cause of death is still being determined, and an investigation is ongoing.
That makes me really sad.
Me too.
You know, I think it was clearly an accident,
Mhm.
or that's how it seems.
Yes.
So far.
Yep.
I don't know what an appropriate course of punishment would be for this, because it was an accident, or at least it seems so far.
Yeah. But that's why it's involuntary manslaughter.
Yeah.
The guy was just trying to do the dishes. He's like, you know what? You don't want me to cook? I'll help. Stay out of someone's kitchen.
I
Just
guess.
don't-
Stay out of the kitchen and don't shove people around.
Yeah, maybe I'll just need to be nicer to each
Yeah,
other.
physical altercations are rarely necessary.
Very true.
Alrighty.
All right, so we've got some listener emails.
We do. If you have thoughts on the cases that we cover, or questions, or something that you'd like us to cover on Extra Credit, by all means, send them in thegrimcurriculum@gmail.com.
I love getting emails from you guys.
Yeah.
Because it's
We've got
super
some pretty
fun.
good insight
Yeah.
from some people. So
Yeah, so if you're thinking about reaching out, we always want to hear it. So talk to us.
Yeah.
First email today is from Judy. Hi, Judy.
Hi, Judy.
So in the Rodney Alcala series, we talked a little bit about the dating game and how raunchy it was for its time.
Mhm.
We talked a little bit about censorship back then. And Judy says, I'm dating myself when I tell you that when I was growing up in the 1960s, every fall, the DJs would announce when the temperature in Hell, Michigan fell below freezing, just so that they could say, hell froze over last night on the air.
I love that, because back in those days, especially on radio, you were very limited with what you could and couldn't talk about.
Mhm.
Even especially in the UK, the BBC was incredibly strict, and you could get in a lot of trouble for saying pretty, to this day's standards, mundane things.
Yeah.
And so I love that they were like, okay, we gotta wait so we can say hell on the air, and
then
we're
they
not
would
gonna
say
get in
it.
trouble.
And then they would say, and they'd be like,
Hell froze over. I love that, Judy. Thank you
Thanks,
so much
Judy.
for sending that in. That's fantastic.
Our second email is from Christian. Hello, Christian.
Hello.
So this one is in regards to our smuggling story last week.
I'm still, every time I see it,
Mhm.
because we've been posting about it on the socials, it gives me the heebie-jeebies. Like, it makes my
Yep.
skin crawl.
It is gross. All right. So Christian says, as a zoologist that has kept many types of invertebrates and brought many cross-border, I have some notes and comments on your most recent Extra Credit episode.
Amazing.
Number 1, I am not sure that this is still the case, but for many years, the international trade in smuggled exotic species of animals was only second to the illegal weapons trade in monetary value.
Whoa. So you could get an AK-47 and a tarantula.
Yeah.
Crazy.
That blew my mind because you wouldn't think. You'd think maybe it's like drugs or something
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
absolutely.
But no, bugs.
Wild.
Bugs, monkeys,
Wild
snakes.
that insects and things like that are so, I guess, yeah, financially valuable. It's not something I've ever really put much thought into.
Yeah. Number 2, with greater and greater protection on endangered species and invertebrates receiving much more attention in recent years, the street value of these creatures has skyrocketed.
That makes sense.
I don't know what tarantula species this guy had, but an estimated street value of $100,000 US would not be far off the mark.
Whoa.
Can you imagine spending $100,000 on a tarantula?
No. Because I don't have $100,000 to spend on anything.
Right? Number 3, ants for Christmas. Although it seems like a weird and really questionable Christmas present to someone into bugs, these ants would be highly desirable. In places like the US, where importation and possession of that species is highly prohibited, obtaining a specimen or two would be a pretty huge deal and worth quite a lot.
It's funny to me that if you control the market for anything,
Mhm.
suddenly the value for that thing, even if it's an ant, skyrockets.
Oh, absolutely. He also says the ants in question are bullet ants, a species whose bite has been frequently compared to the pain of being shot with a .22 caliber bullet. hence the name. Not something I would want secreted on my body. As far as the tarantulas go, virtually no species have a truly dangerous bite, but some can deliver a very painful bite that can result in some rather unpleasant additional symptoms.
Well, I know as well, and I'm speaking very, very generally. So, for bug experts out there, by all means, correct me. But I think for a lot of tarantulas, they're covered in hairs.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you're holding one and it doesn't want to be held, they can. I don't know if release is the right word. I don't think they like shoot them out into you, but
Yeah.
those hairs can become embedded in the
It's a
skin,
defense
which is, yeah,
mechanism.
very irritating. And I'm just picturing Buddy that has these spiders strapped to him and then making him all itchy and shit. I don't want it.
And luckily, they were in containers, but when you look up the pictures, like they're in like Tupperware. I can't imagine strapping like a series of Tupperware containers to my body and being like, off I go.
And I just think like spiders, especially, you know me, I love my octopuses.
Mhm.
And to me, like octopuses are just kind of like spiders of the sea.
Mhm.
That is very general. I obviously know that they're very different critters, but it's like they're intelligent little beings. And so I can just picture literally like a Ziploc container and then just like the tarantula like popping the lid off
Yeah.
and getting out.
So about France, because we were questioning like why he stopped in France.
Oh, yes.
So he says there's a really good reason why the smuggler had to stop over in France. Smugglers will often stop in Europe to legitimize their cargo. What they do is stop by a legitimate European keeper slash breeder and have them create a sales receipt and export permits for the creatures, listing them as captive bred specimens from that European country, permitting them to cross international borders to countries where they are not banned.
Got it. So you're kind of forging passports for bugs.
Basically. Now, for some reason, smuggling small creatures has become very popular for folks from Southeast Asia, but it's not just people from there. A few years back, a woman from Australia was caught smuggling tropical fish into Australia, worth easily $100,000.
Now I'm picturing Ziploc baggies with the fish, but then also water.
Right?
And just
Yeah,
someone being
just
like,
sloshing.
nobody bump into me. Don't touch me.
The potential punishment for smuggling endangered species varies by country.
Mhm.
But in a case like our South Korean friend, it could be up to decades in prison, hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines, or some combination of the two. As well, he will now be flagged as an international criminal, which will prevent him from entering certain countries altogether and will pretty much ensure a cavity search every time he crosses the border.
Oh no.
In regards to spiders on a plane, it has happened more than once and close to home, although in most cases, it has involved a creature that snuck itself into a passenger's carry-on or clothing. And he's shared some articles here that we'll post those on Patreon. A scorpion stung a man from Calgary after it fell on his head from a plane's overhead bin as he was eating lunch.
God, no,
So-
absolutely. The way I would bring down that plane.
Oh my God, I wouldn't be calm. You'd have to arrest me.
Absolutely. The air marshals would have to doggy pile my ass to the ground
Yeah.
because I would like be stripping off my clothes and shit. Like there would be naked Charlotte screaming up and down the aisles of this plane. And then I would end up in prison for all sorts of things.
Right? I wouldn't handle that well.
I mean, I've never personally seen it, but growing up in a small town where basically your only two options as a teenager for jobs were the mill or the grocery store.
Mhm.
And many of my friends, including Cody and Shane, both worked at the local grocery store. And Cody mentioned having seen black widows a couple of times, spiders,
Mhm.
in the like bananas and stuff.
Heard that.
I have personally never seen it, but Cody has. And
Oh my
that
God.
alone, even when I'm in now the produce section of a grocery store, I'm like, is there anybody sneaky in there that's
Right?
waiting to jump out at me?
Yeah.
Ugh.
No, I can't. I can just bugs. I really can't handle
No.
them. All right, and that brings us to our latest strange and unusual death. This one's sad. They're all sad.
They're all sad. It's
but this
it's
one
death.
it started
but-
so innocently.
Ay, ay, ay.
A charter boat deckhand trying to make a group of California school children laugh choked to death on a bait fish that he put in his mouth. Captain Dan Salis of the 50-foot gale force said that deckhand Jeff Twaddle died in front of about 20 elementary school students from the Los Angeles area. He called it a tragic freak accident. Authorities say that the 54-year-old longtime fisherman was trying to make them laugh when he popped the fish in his mouth. It lodged in his throat, and he quickly lost consciousness. He was pronounced dead at a hospital. The children were given grief counseling.
I should hope so. I'm so confused. So it was just kind of like, hee hee, like, I'm gonna eat the fish kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then it just tragic ending. You know what? We were having a conversation off camera about the supposed perfection of the human body.
Yes.
But when you give it any kind of thought,
Mhm.
and we talk about strange and unusual deaths every second week here on Extra Credit. So we've heard our fair share of all the things that could possibly go wrong.
Mhm.
But for something that small and that innocent to end your life by mistake,
Yep.
the human body is not a perfect thing.
No, it
by
is not.
no means. This
Rest in
poor
peace,
gentleman.
Jeff Twaddle.
I did learn when staying over at my in-laws once that a lot of folks that do ice fishing here in the winter, where they literally go out onto the frozen lakes, cut a hole in the water, put your little tub over top and fish through the ice, is that if you're using like your worms or whatever as bait, you would keep them in your mouth.
Ew, why?
Like
No.
in your lip, so that they stay warm.
Oh my god.
So that when you put them on the hook, they still
I hate-
wiggle.
No, you don't need
And
to fish that bad.
okay, that's just normal like earthworms, bait worms. I've also heard about people doing it with leeches as bait
Oh
too.
my god. Why do you have to tell me?
So sorry, Dana.
Ah.
So, you know what? It's not strictly out of the question for fishermen to put their bait in their mouths, but I'm sure this poor fellow wasn't expecting it to have the tragic ending it did.
It's like that old Canadian commercial that would air on like YTV where it was like the puppets singing, "Don't you put it in your mouth."
Don't you put it in your mouth.
Exactly.
Don't you stuff it in your face.
Don't do it.
No, don't do it.
Thank you all so much for listening. This has been the Grim Curriculum.
Extra credit.
Bye.
Bye.